Welcome back everyone to the Bucks County Conservation District's Backyard Vegetable Gardening web series. Last week I showed you how to start seeds indoors, harden them off, and transplant them outside. There was also an extra video this week on building your own cheap and easy garden trellises. Today's video is going to be all about fertilizing. I'm going to go over everything from plant nutrients and deficiencies to fertilizer content and environmental issues. First, let's go over some basic plant physiology. Plants get all the nutrients they need to grow from the soil as they take it up through their roots. They require a variety of both micro and macronutrients. Micronutrients are those which are only required in small amounts, things like chlorine, iron, and manganese. Macronutrients are needed in much larger amounts. The main macronutrients that gardeners and farmers are concerned with is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but there are also things like calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. If a plant doesn't have enough of any of these micro or macronutrients, it has a deficiency, which can cause a variety of issues from stunted growth to chlorosis and even death. The purpose of fertilizer is to solve or prevent any of these deficiencies, as well as boost the plant's overall growth. Since plants get their nutrients from the soil, there are a variety of different soil amendments which can add certain nutrients back to your soil. The main components of commercial fertilizers are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, those three main macronutrients I mentioned earlier. In fact, on almost any fertilizer label, you will see three consecutive numbers, and these three numbers each represent the concentration of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in that fertilizer in that specific order, and that's known as the NPK label. For example, the fertilizer I used in my garden is a 927, as you can see here. That means that in 100 pounds of the fertilizer, there will be 9 pounds of nitrogen, 2 pounds of phosphorus, and 7 pounds of potassium. The NPK label is really useful when figuring out how much fertilizer to apply. If you're a really dedicated gardener, you can actually get your soil tested to see the exact level of nutrients, to see what you're deficient in. There are a variety of at-home soil testing kits you can buy, or most university extension offices provide a soil testing service as well. And then based on those results, you can figure out how much fertilizer you need to apply using your NPK label. For example, if I needed to add 1 pound of nitrogen to my soil and the fertilizer that I'm using has 10 pounds of nitrogen for every 100 pounds of fertilizer, then I would need to apply 10 pounds of fertilizer. Calculating exactly how much fertilizer you need helps you avoid over-applying, which would be a waste of money and can also have negative effects on the environment. Getting your soil tested is pretty advanced and not completely necessary for beginner gardeners. You can also just observe your plants for visible nutrient deficiencies. Since each nutrient serves a specific purpose for the plant, if it's lacking it, you will see visible changes in the plant's appearance and growth. Let's look at nitrogen as an example. Nitrogen is a major component of chlorophyll, the green pigment in plants which they use to photosynthesize and create energy, and also a major component of amino acids, the building blocks for proteins. Therefore, if a plant is not getting enough nitrogen, it will not be able to photosynthesize, making it turn yellow, a symptom called chlorosis. It will also experience stunted growth since it can no longer create proteins to grow. If you see these symptoms in your plants, you can assume that you have a nitrogen deficiency and apply a nitrogen-based fertilizer. But the issue with diagnosing deficiencies is it's not always correct. There are so many other factors like diseases which cause similar symptoms to nutrient deficiencies, causing you to misdiagnose your plant. When in doubt, a soil test will always tell you what your soil is lacking. As I mentioned earlier, you want to try and have an understanding of what your soil needs before you apply any amendments. Over-applying fertilizer is first off a waste of money, because plants can only take up a certain level of nutrients, so everything else you apply after that isn't really doing anything to help. It can actually cause some really serious environmental issues. When excess nitrogen and phosphorus, typically from fertilizer and manure, find their way into nearby bodies of water, they can cause a process called eutrophication. This is where those nutrients stimulate plant growth in the water, leading to an algal bloom, which creates a thick layer of algae on the surface of the water. They block the sunlight from reaching aquatic plants below the surface, causing them to die. And then, when the algae also die, all of this decomposition that happens uses up all the dissolved oxygen in the water. Both plants and animals in the water need this dissolved oxygen to survive, so without it, they die. Eventually, there will be no oxygen left in the water, and the ocean becomes a dead zone where no aerobic organisms can survive. Eutrophication is a huge issue in the world of agriculture and the environment. You over-applying fertilizer in your backyard garden is not going to kill the pond near your house, but it is a concept that I think gardeners should be aware of, especially when applying fertilizers nearby bodies of water. When you need to fertilize and how much you need to use will depend on your soil, the plants you're growing, and the time of year. Generally, it's a good idea to start your growing season by applying a basic fertilizer like a 10-10-10 mix, something that's slow releasing so it lasts a few weeks. And then every couple weeks during the growing season, you can apply a quick releasing fertilizer to give your plants an immediate boost of nutrients. Short season, non-fruiting crops like lettuce and cabbage require the least amount of fertilizers, while long season fruiting crops like tomatoes and strawberries require a lot more nutrients and therefore need to be fertilized more often. Something else to keep in mind is nitrogen fixing legumes. As I mentioned in the plant selection video, things like beans, peas, and lentils have bacteria living in the nodules on their roots, which fix atmospheric nitrogen, making it usable for the plant. This is really awesome because it means legumes require no nitrogen fertilization. This can save you a lot of money, but it's important to remember to not waste any nitrogen-based fertilizers on your legumes. They also leave residual nitrogen in the soil that next season's crops can utilize, which is super awesome. Something else I want to quickly go over is the soil pH's effect on nutrient availability. Sometimes there are more than enough nutrients in the soil, but something is preventing the plant from actually utilizing them. One of the largest causes of this is the soil is too acidic or too alkaline. Each plant prefers a different pH, but they all generally do best around 7, which is neutral. If the pH is too low, it's acidic, and if it's too high, it becomes alkaline. As you can see from this graph, certain nutrients are more available at certain pHs, with the majority being most available around 7. So if you find yourself adding fertilizer but not seeing any changes in your plants, it could be an issue with your pH. You can find out for sure if this is the case with a soil test, as I mentioned earlier, and they also have some at-home kits that are made specifically for the soil pH. Once you find out the pH of your soil, you can add things like lime to fix acidic soils or sulfur to fix alkaline soils. Plant nutrients are a tough concept to understand since they're impacted by so many factors all at once. So it can seem a bit overwhelming when you're deciding if, when, and what fertilizer to use. If you have a vegetable garden, you're gonna need to apply fertilizer at some point, so it's so important to understand your plants, soil, and the fertilizer that you're gonna use so that you can make the best decisions possible. Your plants will tell you when something needs to be changed, and they'll also let you know when you're doing something right. So stay in tune with your garden and make frequent observations on their growth. I hope this video was helpful for you to understand the ins and outs of fertilizing your garden. Next week, we're going to go over some garden pests and how to manage them through integrated pest management. Thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.